Alright, so we got a 3-part series here on sassafras. We're going to have identifying the plant and medicinal purposes. We're going to have the basic how to make sassafras tea or root beer. And then we got this one here, which is going to be part 3, which is going to be a little bit more complicated version of sassafras tea or root beer. And keep in mind, you could make it an actual root beer if you actually add yeast to it and ferment it. And you could also add carbonation to it if that's what you're looking for. But we're not going to ferment it, and we're not going to do the carbonation. So it's kind of more like a tea, really, than a root beer soda or versus a beer kind of concoction here. So in our part 2, our basic sassafras tea, you can kind of see how we processed this and broke it down. But it's going to be basically the same thing. We're going to take this root, we're going to wash it, make sure there's no dirt and sand on it. Then we're going to go ahead and start shaving it and down and processing it with a combination of our knife or scissors, kitchen utensils, whatever you got. This root here is a little bit thicker, so we'll have to use the knife to shave it down a little bit. And we got one more extra tool. We'll go ahead and use these shears to cut this root down a little bit also. It's just going to save our hands and make the job a little bit easier. So the center of this root is pretty strong, so I think it's time to bust out the silky pocket boy here and do a little damage with it. Alright, we got our sassafras root processed. And we got like a big heaping handful plus a little bit in there. So now we're ready to add our purified water. So we just basically want water without the chlorine if we can avoid it. But since we already made part 2 sassafras for this size pot and the root that we had, we're going to add about this much water into the pot, about 3/4, almost all the way full of our filtered water. And then we're going to go ahead and boil our sassafras. And again, we're going to boil it for about 12 to 15 minutes. And we really don't want to go over that 15-minute mark because it's going to make your flavors change a little bit. It could get bitter on you. But basically, you're going to be pulling out the tannins out of that tree root there. So we're going to put our water in here and then start boiling. So we got our sassafras and water on the heat here. So it's warming up. So while this is warming up, we're going to start adding a little bit more to it. So this is just fresh ginger root. We're going to slice this up and we're going to put this in the sassafras pot. And you don't have to worry about skinning this because we're going to strain everything off. As far as your ginger goes, this is just kind of to taste. So add as much or as little as you want. I do like ginger, so we'll go ahead and put a little extra in there. So we're approaching our 15-minute mark for our boil time. So we want to go ahead and add our brown sugar to this. We're going to add approximately 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Now I do have a half cup measuring cup there, but as far as the quarter cup, we're just going to eyeball it. This doesn't have to be kind of exact science stuff here. Quarter cup, maybe. So you want to keep that solution there moving so your sugar doesn't settle to the bottom and start burning. So just keep it stirring and you'll be alright. We're also going to add molasses to this batch. So for your molasses, you just want a dark colored molasses. And this stuff can get pretty strong kind of fast. So we'll add a nice spoonful of it. We might taste test it again and then see if it tastes good to us. This molasses is also going to thicken it up a little bit. So it's not going to have such a watery consistency. And as this stuff is cooking, go ahead and take a spoonful of it here and there and give it a taste test and kind of decide what you want to add to it. That's really good. So our cook time is done. So what we're going to do now is strain it off. We're going to use 2 layers of cheesecloth and we'll strain it into a big bowl. And then we'll take that liquid and we'll go ahead and put it in some mason jars. So the last layer of flavor on this root beer here is going to be vanilla. And so for our vanilla, you could have cooked it down with an actual vanilla bean, but I think that if you use this vanilla extract like the liquid here, I think it's just a little bit better. And I like vanilla quite a bit, so we're going to be gracious with it. And we're going to add this to it after it's done cooking here. It's still steaming a lot. But if you add your vanilla while it's boiling, you're actually going to lose a lot of that flavor because it's going to burn off. And you could smell that vanilla coming off the evaporation there. So you could taste test it also if you want to see how it tastes, if you need more vanilla in there. But you could smell it coming off too though. So now we're going to go ahead and put it in the mason jars. So just like in our part 2, making the Sassafras tea basic, you're going to want to let this cool down. You could let it cool here for a little bit, stick it in your refrigerator, let it get nice and cold. I like mine ice cold like I was saying, so I put mine in the freezer for a little bit before I drink it. But as this sits here and settles, you're going to get some fines that settle to the bottom of it. No big deal, you could drink it if you want. But when you pour this out, if you pour it into like a cup or another container, pour it real slow and you could separate those fines from the rest of your Sassafras tea here. So if you didn't get a chance to watch our part 2 of our basic Sassafras tea, make sure you guys check that out. This one here has a little bit more bolder of a flavor. You could definitely tell that there's more ingredients into it. It could have used a little bit more sugar. Has a little bit of a bite to it, but it's still very good though. This one here also, I need to make it a little bit more cold. It's not quite as cold as I'd like it to be. But keep in mind, anytime you guys are consuming any kind of wild edibles, make sure you do your own research on that. And keep in mind, like with sassafras, some people say you shouldn't consume it. I've been drinking it for years now. I've had zero issues with it. I think if you drink too much of it in large amounts and strong concentrations, you might have some issues with it. But as far as drinking the sassafras tea, I feel that I'm fine with it. So just make sure you guys use good judgment and make sure you do your research on there, and we'll catch you next time.